Welcome back to another school year, another football season, and another episode of Kernel at the Buzzer. I'm your host, Colton Johnson, and this week it is all Kentucky football. We're going to talk about their new roster, new opponents in Texas and Oklahoma being added to the SEC, and the unsure future for the Kentucky Wildcats. All that and more next. Welcome back to a new school year, a new football season, and a new episode of Kernel at the Buzzer. I'm your host, Colton Johnson. Today I'm joined by three people you're going to hear a lot from this year. Introduce yourselves.
I'm the sports editor, once again, Cole Parke.
I am the assistant sports editor and on the football beat, Jonathon Bruner.
I'm on the football beat and a sports writer, and I'm Sara Gibson.
Shocker, Cole is still the sports editor. But nonetheless, football is back. It's a beautiful time to be alive. How y'all feeling?
Feeling all right. Excited for the football season. It's gotten here a lot faster. I feel like during the summer it feels like it takes forever, but now that it's here, it's been moving at rapid pace. I mean, we're on track right now to have 4 football stories going out every single day, and that's not even including the ones that we're still going to be writing this week throughout practices and interacting with the Southern Miss, the student Prince with a Z. And all the stories we still have coming about that. So a lot of football coverage coming out. We have our pigskin preview special section. First physical special section of the year. Very excited for that. It's on the racks around campus, embedded into the back-to-school section. And we've got some really, really great stories. Actually, probably the first sports newspaper, whether weekly or special section, that I don't have a published story in since I had my first published story as a freshman. So that's a little bit bittersweet for me. But I think these three here, along with your host, killed it, as well as our boy P. Sizzle, also on the football beat.
In case it wasn't obvious, we're talking about football today. And I feel like the biggest question that everyone wants to talk about is the guy under center. And as the people that I'm going to be in the press box with a lot this year, what are we thinking about Mr. Vandegrift?
I think it's just going to be one of those things we're going to have to just see it on the field because you hear all these things. There's not a whole lot to go off of is the thing. He hasn't hardly played. But 5-star coming out of high school, went to Georgia. You know, Georgia don't recruit slouches. I mean, so they obviously seen something that they thought they could work with in their program. So, but I also think that, you know, here he's going to demand a lot bigger of a role where sometimes at Georgia, so the quarterback is not necessarily the most important position on the field for them. I think it is going to be for this Kentucky team. And it's kind of unfair to put all the success on one guy, but if the offense is inefficient like it was last year, it's going to kill Kentucky this year just like it did last year.
I definitely agree with Jonathon there. Coming off of last year with Devin Leary, he had a lackluster 56.3 completion percentage compared to Will Levis the years before, who was like mid-high 60s consistently. I think Brock Vandegrift has a low bar like set from him from the years before.
Mm-hmm.
So I think his chances of exceeding those expectations are a little high. 5-star coming out of high school, pure pocket passer, has shown athleticism. Like, I'm excited to see where he can go, especially considering what Kentucky fans have been used to the last few seasons with Leary.
Now, you have the term transfer quarterback attached to both him and Leary, two very different types of transfer. One, you have a guy that played 3-4 years of college football, and then you have a guy that has 165 total yards and 2 touchdowns in his entire career at Georgia. Did not complete a pass until his junior year there. So, I mean, like you said, you touched on it. There's a small sample size with this guy. What does that mean?
I just think that you're never going to know what you're really going to get with him until he's on the field, till he's playing. I think it can work in Kentucky's favor because it's going to be hard to scout and game plan for a guy like him because of just that. There's no film to watch. Unless you go back to his high school film, which I would hope now he's developed a little bit since. So
just a little bit.
One would think. So I think that could work in Kentucky's favor. But as far as the skill goes and what people should expect, it's kind of up in the air right now. And I think you will see really week 2 what this season could really be like, kind of how high this season could get or how low it could get. Because Southern Miss is not the greatest test for a new quarterback. I mean, Leary did okay in non-conference, and then we saw how that went when competition rose. So I think we'll see early what this guy can be.
Now, you said week 2. We'll know what we got.
Yeah.
You know, we play week 2.
I mean,
I think that's a bit of a tall task. I mean, to kind of gauge, but nonetheless, I don't know. Maybe South Carolina, we can have that conversation later. I kind of want to move on to the next position, another one of high contention. I want to talk about these running backs. We know it's going to be very different from any of the what is used personnel-wise, snap counts, and how the running backs are used on this team. Obviously, we got a big curveball thrown a couple weeks ago with Chip breaking his hand. But what do y'all think is going to be the narrative with this running back room?
To me, I mean, both the quarterbacks and the running backs, the biggest piece this year, or the biggest word, is depth. You see, with the quarterbacks, just to finish up that with a little nice footnote, we saw years ago with Levis what happens when the starting quarterback went down to Kentucky. Kai Sharon, very nice guy, did not have it. Mm-hmm. Now you've got 2 really capable quarterbacks in Brock Vandegrift and Gavin Wimsatt from Rutgers. Then you have 4 total quarterbacks because you got Bo Allen also training Cutter Boley, the freshman. You're not going to see much out of them this year, but you have options. We got a running back. Kentucky's a school that for as long as I've been in college and even before that, it's been defined by one just stellar running back. You had Chris Rodriguez, you had Benny Snell, you had Ray Davis. I mean, these guys are 3 back-to-back-to-back generational running backs for a college to have. I mean, fantastic level running backs. And this year, you don't maybe have that as much. I'm not saying Chip can't be that when he comes back, but he's probably not going to be a 1,000-yard career rusher. You're going to have much more of a committee approach, with Chip going out, and hopefully he'll be able to live up to those expectations when he comes back. But you do have Demisumo Krongbe, a guy you saw last year who had a lot of flashes and potential, and you've got other guys down that line like Patterson, guys who can really shine and really, have a committee approach. So it'll be something a little bit different that Kentucky fans are used to, I think, but it'll be something that, I think fans also need to see that there's not really – I was going to use a really Southern phrase there, but we're not going to use that phrase. There's a lot of different ways to do things.
Yeah, I mean, I second that. I think that it's going to be and it's even been said, it's going to be a by-committee approach, which is very abnormal coming from all those, NFL-type talent running backs who just were feed it to them, 30 carries a game, call it a day. I don't think it's going to be that simple. I think we're going to see a different offense, or at least should see a different offense that's maybe not so run-heavy, which it could be unique and something that fans aren't really used to. But I also think that the dual approach could also have some benefits in making it harder to plan for Kentucky and making it harder to defend against them if Ray Davis might not get, there's not that one guy where everyone in the stadium knows he's getting the ball at least 2 times on every drive no matter what. Mm-hmm. With that not there this year, I think it could present a new element to Kentucky's offense that just hasn't been there.
Mm-hmm. I don't have much to add to their analysis or breakdown there. I think they nailed that on the head pretty much.
Covered it, right?
But I will say with Chip being down, the guy that I heard a lot about in the media preseason at practices and stuff was Jason Patterson. This is a guy who in high school had 3,800 yards and 50 touchdowns his junior and senior seasons. Obviously the SEC is not Florida high school, but he's just a guy that the excitement has been there, and I'm excited to see how that translates, especially with him getting an earlier opportunity than what we expected with Chip being out.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to touch on something Jonathon said there. Stoops himself has even said, I think we were at our best when everybody knew who was getting the ball and we were still finding success with it. And I can respect that, but I think it's also a more idyllic, you're almost living in the past when you do that, because let's not forget the reason Kentucky was that way, everyone knew who was getting the ball and you were still good at it, was because that was the only option. Mm-hmm. You simply couldn't throw the football. Mm-hmm. So you didn't have a choice but to be good at it. I think that, while it was nice to have so many years of Kentucky where you knew exactly what they were going to do, but they would still do it, why do you want to pigeonhole yourself into that idea? You've got quarterbacks who can throw the ball. Now you've got quarterbacks who can run with the ball. You've got running backs who can run, fantastic receivers. I mean, across the board, you've got options. And with a guy like Bush Hamdan taking over as OC, I think we're going to see a very versatile offense. Mm-hmm. One who, rather than everybody knows what's coming, nobody knows what's coming. You can predict, but one that keeps defenses on their heels. I think that's going to be, especially with the SEC getting 2 new teams, 2 really tough teams, that's going to be one of the keys to prevent Kentucky from sinking down, is that unpredictability about them.
Mm-hmm. Now, I don't want to go position group by position group here, but one group I did want to put a bit of a highlight on. You expect the defensive line to do what they're going to do. You expect the wide receivers to do what they're going to do. There's not many question marks around that. But, Sarah, I know you've been following these linebackers a lot. Tell me what's going on there with the mics. Tell me what's going on.
I think Kentucky's linebacker, inside linebacker duo has the potential to be one of the best in the nation. You're talking about a guy with leading the linebacker core, De'Aaron Jackson. He's been with the team for years now, the leading tackler the last 2 seasons. A guy that is comfortable in Brad White's system and comfortable executing Brad White's system. We'll see how that looks this year with the helmet comm. But he's helping translate this defense to another top linebacker in the nation, transferred from Georgia just like Brock, and Jamin Pop Dumas Johnson. He's a stud. We're a guy that coming from Georgia has the chance to learn under guys like Nakobe Dean, who's playing in the NFL now, who has 34 tackles, 5.5 for a loss, and 3 sacks. That's major production to add to your already good linebacker core. And then you look at the return of J.J. Weaver, who has just been a staple of this Mark Stoops and Brad White defense. They're looking for consistent game-changing plays out of him. Between those 3, I think it's hard to compete with. And then they're kind of working through that outside linebacker spot opposite of J.J. Weaver still. I think that's going to be Alex Safari, who's having a position change from safety.
They had him listed as the depth chart for the strong side top of the depth chart for the strong side linebacker.
He is the top of the – okay. So, yeah. Look at me showing my not looking at the depth chart like I should have when it came out yesterday. So it is Alex Safari across from him. So that makes a lot of sense, especially the way Brad White was talking about him, the way that Pop and De'Aaron have helped him translate this defense and move to a new position. He's feeling confident, and obviously week 1 against Southern Miss will help him, adjust to it, and we'll see week 2 South Carolina if the outside linebackers are ready to go.
No, I told you I'd give you the opportunity to do your special teams rant.
Yeah.
I know we're not too happy with the we knew that Alex Rayner was going to be the kicker. That was not going to be that wasn't the doubt. Let it out, man. Tell us how you feel.
Yeah, okay. So I was looking at the depth chart, and I get down to punter, and I was expecting to see, transfer. Guy we bring in. Brand new guy. And I see Wilson Berry's name on there.
You're selling a little bit short by just saying brand new guy, as if it's not FCS punter of the year.
FCS punter of the year averages around 10 more yards per punt than this team put up last year with Wilson Berry as the punter. It was pretty obvious last year that punting situation was not ideal. And, there was some coach speak in some interviews that tried to make it not look as bad, but it was terrible. I mean, field position was awful for the majority of the year. And to still see running it back with the same guy isn't even a possibility after bringing in a transfer. What are we doing? I don't understand. This is a travesty.
Anything else to add? Are we good?
I think we're good. We can
Are
carry
we
on.
good on the punting conversation? You sure?
As long as we can pick this back up if Wilson Berry comes back out on the field.
Okay, cool. We're going to jump topics. We talked enough about this team. I want to talk about who they're playing. One team in particular, 2 teams that they could be playing, just additions to the conference. I want to talk about Oklahoma and Texas. The implications that come with those 2 monsters being in the SEC now, what are they?
They're massive. I mean, both across all sports really, but in football they're massive. And for Kentucky, you got to have a little bit of sirens going off in your head when you see that happening, because simply put, I don't know how they're both going to fare. I don't know what they're both going to do, but if we're just looking at last year, Kentucky goes from 1 spot on the rankings to 2 spots lower, because Oklahoma and Texas were both better than them. Now, you never know with the 2. I think that there's 2 very different scenarios you could be looking at with the 2 teams. Texas, I have no doubt in my mind, rather unfortunately for Kentucky since they're going there this year, that Texas is going to adapt just fine. They're going to be at the top of the conference. They're going to be up there with the Alabamas, the Georgias. Every single year you can expect Texas to be really good. Went to the college football playoffs last year. Wouldn't be shocked if they do it again this year. Oklahoma, a little bit more of a maybe. Who knows? I mean, it's easy to forget now, but there was a time where an Arkansas or a Missouri were not what they are now. They were a little bit, they've fallen down a little bit since joining the SEC. I wouldn't be shocked if that's Oklahoma, but also we're talking about Oklahoma, a team who has been to the college football playoffs. Whether or not they did well in it,
Multiple Heisman winners, though.
Multiple Heisman winners. I mean, a really, really good school that has the resources to succeed. So Kentucky, it just makes it that much harder. Obviously, with the playoffs expanding, it makes it a little bit easier, but it makes it that much harder to be consistently near the top of the SEC. And Kentucky, for a little while, got to that spot where they were usually just below Georgia. Maybe they would be battling for Florida with that spot, but they were just below Georgia. Now, there's not divisions in the SEC really anymore. It's kind of every man for themselves. So you've got Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Oklahoma, Ole Miss this year. Who knows what they're going to be? I mean, Kentucky could do everything they can, lose only the games they're expected to lose, and be like 6th in the SEC. That's tough.
Yeah, I mean, I think Texas will keep on rolling just like they were last year. I mean, we saw what they came into Alabama and did. If that wasn't enough evidence that they're going to be just fine, I don't know what else you need to see. I mean, truly, I know that Bama got a lot better as the year went on, and you run that game back at a different time. It might have been different, but it also could have been the exact same, and I would have been like, okay, that's fair. Just the way they kind of just took care of business in Alabama, that shows that Texas is going to be just fine and will probably make a lot of noise this year. Looking at Oklahoma, I think you hit it right on the head, Cole. I think it's a kind of a toss-up still. They have the resources, the availability. I think that was the key point of both of these schools is you're bringing in two schools who have all the resources in the world to build excellent programs that can knock Kentucky down even 2 more pegs. And you're kind of seeing a little bit of a downslope with Kentucky going into this year with back-to-back seasons of kind of just mediocre. And, that's raised a lot of NIL questions and whatnot. But these two schools are going to be able to – they're going to be right there with NIL with all these other schools in the conference, which is going to create big-time challenges for Kentucky if they don't, figure out a new system and better ways to win.
Kind of flipping things from just looking at the competition side and needing to find wins and how much more difficult that will be with teams like Texas and Oklahoma. Just kind of looking at it through a fan perspective, it makes me wonder, like, having more teams come in with, like, championship caliber expectations and college football or playoff caliber expectations. How much longer are Kentucky fans going to be okay or, like, find it acceptable to win 7 to 10 games and maybe a bowl win if things go their way? Like, will Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC give Kentucky fans the kick in the butt that they need to be like, winning 8 games or winning 9 games isn't acceptable? We want championship caliber expectations, and I'm just curious to see how that goes.
Sara, I feel like you should honestly be the host of this podcast because that's exactly where I was going. And because of that, I'm going to throw it right back to you. With you saying that you don't know how long Kentucky fans are going to be happy with these 7-win seasons, these 6-win seasons, where at the end of the day, we talk about, the Fiesta Bowl going there and we have a somewhat of a bowl game that maybe we win, maybe we don't, they win, sorry. Maybe they win, maybe they don't. We talk about Mark Stoops, the guy that's got them to this point. Is there a point that the people with the powers that be look at Mark Stoops and be like, yeah, he's brought us all this way, but maybe he's not the guy to get us there?
I think there definitely is an appreciation and a love for everything Mark Stoops has done for Kentucky football. I mean, he has put them from laughable to, like, a respectable team, a team that now Kirby Smart in Georgia looks at to Kentucky and says they're a tough match. They play physical. Like, we have to be prepared for them. So I think that's obviously something that we should love Mark Stoops for. But at the same time, I do feel like, especially with the change of the college sports landscape, not just college football landscape, that maybe Stoops leaving for Texas A&M would have been a better thing for Kentucky, because in the long run, these 7-8 win seasons, sure, they feel good for right then in the moment, but when you take a step back and you look at just 8-win season after 8-win season, 7-win season after 7-win season, it's just not what Kentucky fans want to see, and just not what I want to see.
Now, Cole, bit of a flashback here. Going back to the evening about the whole Mark Stoops fiasco, when we didn't know if he was going to College Station, we did know if he was going to College Station. looking back at that, knowing and seeing this type of conversation grow now, if you go back, if you could go back, not really if you could go back, but do you think that it'd have been better if he left?
I think that there's definitely reason to believe that. The biggest question after that would be, where do you go from there?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously the biggest name right now would be probably Sumrall. We'll see how he does at Tulane this year. Did really, really well at Troy. Turned them into an actual respectable program in the Fun Belt. Shout out to him. But, I want to echo a lot of what Sara said, though. I mean, everyone wants to say we're in the SEC. We've got the toughest schedule. Vandy's in the SEC, too. You know, being in the SEC isn't good enough anymore. And I'm not saying Kentucky's Vandy because, over a decade ago they were worse than Vandy, but now Vandy's respect to Vandy. But, I'm not saying Kentucky's at that level, but you are looking at, just being in the SEC isn't good enough anymore. I mean, we're still looking at the same conversations that we're having all these years ago. I mean, Stoops is complaining about NIL. Kroger Field still isn't seen as that elite of an atmosphere. You think that's going to be? You think that Texas is going to be a calm atmosphere when they go at the end of the year? I don't think so. They don't play at Oklahoma, but I can tell you there's probably no love there. But I think that there's a lot of people who would say it would have been better if he had left. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the conversations that started about Calipari when people said, maybe he should have gone to UCLA in 2019. Revisionist history, we can change our minds at the time. Nobody wanted him to go at the time when Stoops was going in. There was a lot of fears about what are we going to do. But I just think that this year is going to be a really big prove-it year. It's right here on the front of this special section, prove-it year for Kentucky football. It needs to be a good year for Mark Stoops, or the conversation is going to be really unbearable.
Now, JB, I remember that you were the one that kind of sparked this conversation, among us at least. And when you look at the situation with Stoops, and after every season when they have their same what's happened the past two seasons, the 7-6, go win a bowl game maybe. Everyone always asks him, what's it going to take for Kentucky to get to the next level? And he had that one radio show that sparked it all. He told everyone to pony up.
Yeah.
And in a sense, like, he's kind of right. That's what needs to happen. It would help at least, but in your mind, what else would he have to do apart from NIL, if there even is anything that would elevate Kentucky football?
It's even harder now looking at some of the things, because you look at the 10-3 year now technically has a big asterisk on it.
Technically it's an 0-3 year now.
Exactly. I mean, looking at that now with all that stuff vacated, now you look at, okay, well, what else is Stoops' legacy? Especially in recent years, it's been mediocre. And so, personally, I don't think NIL could save this team. I think that and this year will prove it one way or another, whether his time is up. I think if it's another year of middle of the pack to below in the SEC, that it might be time to have the serious conversation of it's time for a new voice. It's time for someone else. And I think that is the fix. I think if Kentucky wants to reach that level, he's not the guy.
But it's not like a you're not good enough, get out situation. It's a thank you for what you've done. We're going to go a different direction.
Yes. So. Oh, of course, for sure. And I mean, I don't think it's outside of the realm for Mark Stoops to have, something named after him or something to honor his time here, a statue, any of the above, and that should absolutely happen, because it's no secret that what he's done for this program is take them from nothing, bottom feeders, laughing stocks, to something to where it's not, okay, Kentucky's an easy win this week for certain teams anymore, where it used to be Kentucky was an automatic. You could count it. Where it's not like that anymore. Yeah. Now it's, we have to be competitive against Kentucky or they can beat us.
Yeah.
But there's still, to me, is such a gap between Kentucky and Georgia and Bama and now Texas and now even possibly Ole Miss with some of the noise they could make this year.
Yeah.
Now that's 4 teams before we even really get into any debate that are miles ahead of Kentucky. And that's why I don't think even with NIL he could get to that level with those programs. I just don't see it.
Now, talking about Stoops' legacy at Kentucky, we're going to talk about the inevitable sequel to one of the bigger smears on it. We're going to talk about the Southern Miss game, which on paper, I don't know what y'all think, it should be if all goes well, a W, pretty easy W, right?
Yeah.
In theory, yeah.
In theory, right?
In theory.
That's what they thought 10 years ago.
That is what they thought 10 years ago. I mean, different connotation around Kentucky football now. But looking at this game from an analytical standpoint, I mean, what are y'all wanting to see?
I think we just need to see them, first of all, just take care of business. This should not be close at any point. It should be a runaway game. But I just think a clean game early. I think limited little to no turnovers from the offense would be nice to see, because you want to build confidence going, because the conference starts right next week, South Carolina. I mean, you get right into conference action, where last year I think they had kind of 3 games to kind of figure it out. You don't have that this year, because if you don't figure it out, South Carolina, who has had your number, could easily come in here and beat you. So I think being in sync early and, just if an efficient game on both sides of the ball and with special teams would be all I need to see to just kind of get some early confidence in this team.
Some words that you just said there that really stuck with me. You want to see them in sync. That is like a question that has been circulating this Kentucky offense all offseason so far, and leading up to the season, is the tempo. What is this offense going to look like tempo-wise? So week 1, I'm looking at Brock Vandegrift and his receivers. Are they on the same page? Is the timing there? What's the tempo of this offense look like? And if that's looking good, then, a little optimistic for South Carolina. But it does kind of suck not having that cushion for them this year of getting to play the Ohios and the Murray States before you get into that conference play.
Yeah, and I mean, it's caused a question over the last couple of years, is like, because it's normally taken them a game or two. Because, I mean, like, even the EKU game last year was close at halftime. It was a ball game. You were like, no way this is actually going to happen, right? Yeah. Like, they can't afford that this year, or they could easily start off 0-3, which could happen anyways.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with a lot of what Jonathan said here. The biggest thing I want to see is just come out ready to play and nail it across the board. I want to see a good offense, like Sara talked about. That needs to be key. But another thing I think that needs to be key, how are the corners and the defensive backs going to do? The defensive line, I've got complete faith in them. The linebacker group, we've already talked about them. But how are those backs going to do? They lost Andrew Phillips to the draft. That was one that last year they even had a tendency sometimes to give up some deep balls, some 3rd and longs. Can we limit the silly mistakes against a team that should be beaten? Simply put, I don't want, and I think Jonathan used the exact words, I don't want it to be close for even a second. I think Kentucky needs to come out here and say, hey, we're here, we're ready. South Carolina, Georgia, we're not looking that far ahead to you yet, but like, you have to pay attention to us. Don't let this be a game, don't let this be close, and God forbid, don't start how Florida State did.
Yeah. Well, concluding point, I'm going to go around, I'm going to ask for each of y'all know. It's already in the Pigskin preview. If you want to check out their thoughts on the first game, we're not going to do the whole schedule this year, this episode. You can go look at the preview for all that. But talk about the Southern Miss game. How do you think it's going to go?
I'm going to say...
I want to score. Yeah, I want to score.
Okay.
I want the exact score.
I'm going to go 31-3, Kentucky.
31-3.
I'm kind of with JB here on this. I think it's going to be a defensive masterclass for Kentucky. I think that's going to be the staple of the team this year. So I think Southern Miss is going to be low scoring. I'm kind of more nervous about our offense, though. I'll go more like 28-7.
I'm going to go 38-14, touchdown for Southern Miss in garbage time.
Okay.
Garbage time touchdown.
Yeah, he's taking care of the garbage time touchdown. Well, you 3 fools. I'm sure I'll have plenty of you on here for the rest of I'm not going to get sick of you at all. So.
Oh, no.
Well, thank y'all for coming on. It's been awesome, and catch y'all next week.
Let's do it.
We want to thank you for tuning in to this episode of Kernel at the Buzzer. We'll have plenty more Kentucky football next week. We'll talk about the results of their game against Southern Miss and talk about the Cats as they encroach SEC play. Again, we want to thank you for tuning in. I've been Colton Johnson, and we'll see you next week.